the future, we will never be the same. For this moment, more than any moment in our history, has made all of the people in the world realize that we are part of a planet that is part of a system, that is part of a universe. We are a small, energetic species, capable of pettiness, yet capable of brilliance. We know how bad we can be. Now you, the men of Capricorn 1, have shown us how wonderful we can be, by showing us how high we can reach. You have crossed the last great frontier, and you have shown us what we are. People, of different colors and religions and ideologies, however, a single people. You are the basic truth in us. You are the reality. We will never let you down, and we will always be grateful.
All it takes is the technology to stimulate and transfer the right images in our brain, so our brain creates them, and then we will live like the difference between us dreaming and reality will be blurred. We will be spending a lot of time outside our bodies. So, think about this. You, as a human being right now, are trapped in this body. But once you are connected to the internet, you are no longer trapped in your body. You can actually be anywhere at any time that any other person or any other device is getting sensory information. So there could be a robot on Mars, and you could literally tap into the robot on Mars, and it would be like you're on Mars. It could totally recreate the experience, including the sensations, the physical sensations, like everything of you being on Mars. People, your favorite pop star, your favorite scientist. You could be in Elon Musk's head right now, walking around doing what he's doing, if Elon Musk allowed you to do that.
Okay, well, that was a clip from a TED Talk, a recent TED Talk with Steve Hansen, where he's talking about the interface between the human mind and the internet of everything. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but I actually had not seen it until I was watching a compilation, a documentary by Truth Happens, the Truth Happens channel. And she put this together. I watched it and was just really blown away by all the stuff that she put together with that. And I'm going to put the link in the description, and I want everyone to go check that out if you haven't. Even if you're very familiar with a lot of these topics, there was a lot of clips and interviews and things that I had not seen yet. So definitely a good thing to show to people, especially if they're still kind of hesitant to believe that things are really progressing to the degree that they are. I mean, a lot of these things have been talked about for a long time, but in a very hypothetical way, especially from a biblical prophecy perspective. And it really is, even for myself, who's been looking at this stuff pretty regularly for however many years, it's still astounding to see how, these guys are getting up on stage at TED Talks and Google and everything, and seriously talking about, things like the neural lace and inserting microchips and how we can connect the mind to machines and the mind to the internet. And I was actually putting together this little something on the whole thing about Mars, and I was talking to Dean Odell about he mentioned to me about how the Capricorn 1 movie from the 70s was actually kind of what made him realize that the Apollo missions were fake. So I'd forgotten about that, and I was looking at the Capricorn 1 footage and just using that for fun. But they actually do already have a program that NASA and JPL has done in cooperation with Microsoft, supposedly taking the quote-unquote photos from Mars, from the Mars rover, and piecing them together into a 3D environment that people can already, right now, go and explore using VR. So the things that he's talking about they're already sort of making the necessary steps to put it in place if it actually ever does get to that point where you literally jack in like the Matrix and are connected to the internet and connected to virtual reality experiences without even having to put on goggles or anything like that. So pretty amazing, because I had not heard that quote, and he literally, this is something I've been thinking about, and he literally says it, like, this is what we're going to do. And I honestly think that if they do try and fake a Mars landing, or fake a Mars more than what they've already faked with just the rovers, that's probably the route that it's going to take, rather than trying to just redo what has already been done with the Apollo missions in terms of a set and actors and wires and all that hokey stuff. That it's going to be all digital, it's going to be all 3D, it's going to be all having to do with the internet. And so it's crazy to hear him saying that. So, but yeah, she covers a lot of stuff, and it was kind of refreshing, because sometimes I find myself just kind of like bouncing around between all of these different sort of vectors, all these different topics, and to me they all definitely are connected from my perspective. But sometimes it's hard to know, like, how do you just jump into cosmology and fake space and NASA and all that, and then connect that to the Internet of Everything and the singularity and artificial intelligence and the mark of the beast and on and on and on. And I think a lot of people are realizing how connected this is, but it's still hard to fully articulate with the technocracy and all this, and how it's really all one thing. And she does a really good job of, even like covering the whole gamut, from like ley lines and having to do with the energy, these energy lines that supposedly connect the Earth, which is an interesting thing to consider, even on a flat Earth, and somehow like radiating out from the North Pole, or however that might work, whatever that's really all about. But then sort of building on top of that with this network, this internet, she gets into 5G, talking just all over the place. And what it reminded me of was this concept of the noosphere, which Teilhard de Chardin came up with back in the 30s, I think he wrote. He wrote a book called The Phenomenon of Man. It wasn't published until the 50s, but he wrote it in 1938, I think. He was a Jesuit priest, of course, but basically, he was a mystic or an occultist. And it's pretty safe to say that where he got his concept of the noosphere from was from demonic inspiration. It was from the spiritual realm. And so this concept existed for a long time. He wasn't the first one to talk about this, but perhaps was articulating it in a different way. But talking about this whole, basically like a living tissue of consciousness is how he described it in the book. And that's essentially what this guy, Stephen Hansen, and all these other guys who were really on board with the idea of the singularity and the idea of human beings being connected to this internet of everything, whether it's through smart dust or microchips or neural lace or Wi-Fi signal, just the whole panoply of technological things that they're rolling out and pushing. It's this living, we're all going to be one mind, one consciousness. You're going to have access to all the knowledge of all of human history. And not only that, but this guy in this TED Talk, he's talking about how you'll be able to feel other people's feelings and experience, kind of like being John Malkovich. You actually can go into their body and look through their eyes and see what they see and feel what they feel. And won't it just be this great, marvelous era of empathy and love and peace? And it's insane. But so yeah, we see this whole idea of the noosphere. Of course, that definitely hinges upon the idea that the Earth itself is a sphere or a globe, and that there's this living tissue of consciousness, this living tissue of thought around it. And that's weird from sort of a cosmology standpoint, where when you think about just kind of what we've been piecing together about the planets and the more esoteric understandings of those things, and how the idea of them being spheres or spherical planets is really more symbolic of the idea of spheres of influence or dominions and powers. That's really kind of what I understand the sphere to represent. It's a dominion, right? Because if the world were a globe like we were taught it was, it's this idea that you can't leave it, you're within it. It has boundaries because it's all connected, and that's what the noosphere itself is. It's like creating another planet, but it's a planet of information. It's a planet of thought and interconnectedness, where everything runs into everything else, wrapping around like this big ball of information and data and energy and all that. But it's a totally occult idea. The internet really is an occult idea, and we can demonstrate that through things like Teilhard de Chardin and the noosphere. And so virtual reality and this idea of, he even talks about becoming gods. We're going to become gods and it's amazing because it really is describing the very same thing that, the mystery schools and the whole idea of, transhumanism is just an absolute embodiment of the dream of the ancient great work of trying to achieve apotheosis for mankind and all that. And it's funny how a lot of people who are sympathetic to esoteric teachings and various occult ideas and want to try and argue that there's good in it and there's truths to be gleaned from the occult elites and stuff, and it's not all bad and you have to kind of like pick the meat out from the bones or whatever. But then they, of course, when you start talking about technocracy and about transhumanism in this technological sense, most of the time there is a resistance to that, right? They do recognize that there is sort of an insidious element to that whole idea of connecting everything to the internet, connecting everyone to the internet, and then promising this technological utopia, but it's really, 1984 meets Brave New World. So they are arguing for there's a natural way to achieve a higher level of consciousness and a natural way to use technology without it being done in this authoritarian way, which intrigues me, that whole argument, because really, once you come back to the realization that when you're either talking about pantheistic monism or you're talking about conventional atheism, conventional scientific materialism, in either sense, you really can't argue for this idea of that certain things are quote unquote unnatural. So this idea that that technologically based transhumanism is unnatural there's really nothing to base that, because everything is natural from a scientific materialism point of view, everything that's happening is natural. Everything is nature. That's all there is. There is no design. There is no way to deviate from the God's intended plan, because there is no intended plan. There is no map. There is no blueprints. There is no commandments. There is no anything. It's just whatever is happening is just the way it's randomly evolving. Similarly, from a pantheistic approach, everything is an emanation of God. Everything is a fractalized sort of droplet of God. Everything is God in miniature, a microcosm of the macrocosm, blah, 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 blah. So you can't say that like connecting wires and connecting everyone through technology and through ones and zeros and microchips and quantum computers or whatever else comes out, you can't say that that's any less natural or that's any less a part of spiritual evolution as sitting in the jungle drinking ayahuasca or whatever else. It's all just as natural. It's all just part of the divine dance, the divine progression, the upward spiral, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, overall, it's just, I watched that whole, it's over an hour of stuff that she put together, and I was, went by very quickly because of all the interesting stuff that she pieced together, and I definitely, once again, I encourage you all to go watch her video called Technotopia, The Truth About Smart Cities, 5G, and the Earth Grid, and go subscribe to her channel as well, because she does fantastic work. All right, God bless.